By the time the band started its second pass at the old love song, the ceiling fans were already pushing warm air across the community hall in slow circles, dragging the scent of mogra and cardamom tea over the heads of people who dressed to be seen. I stood in the back with my hands folded, the laminated lanyard of vendor liaison settling against the Zardozi border of my shawl, like it had always belonged there. A stage crowded with pastel blossoms, a backdrop of glittered initials, a pedestal where a tall crystal vase caught the light of 100 LED candles and refracted it into thin blades on the floor. Everything said performance. At the far end, Shabnam, my mother-in-law, adjusted the paloo of her champagne sari and laughed into someone's ear as if the world and its ledger owed her nothing. My husband Adil was at her side under a garland shaped like a question mark. I kept my face plain, a surface the party could skim over. The room's sound was layered, cutlery on plates, a chorus of whispers. The tired whir of an overworked aircon struggling behind a lattice screen. Every few seconds, the sliding doors near the buffet side open and shut, letting in a blade of colder air from the hallway. When the servers moved past with platters of Sikh, kebab, and malai bodhi, the smell chased them, heavy and sweet. I had the strange sensation of watching a movie spliced from clips. It shouldn't fit together. A wedding reception where the bride was 58 and resplendent, and the daughter-in-law wearing a vendor tag. A good wedding is a choreography, I thought. It has entrances and exits and cues and marks on the floor where light is supposed to find you. But a perfect wedding has something better: compliance. Shabnam's eyes swept the hall once, the way an owner glances at a shop at closing time. Her gaze hopped over me like I was another rental chair. That was fine. I didn't exist in her seating chart. She had made sure of that weeks ago. Immediate family only. She'd told the planner in a voice as soft as a Valen. Then she'd cross my name off the list with a pen that left grooves in the paper. The day the courier came with embossed envelopes, and Adil opened one to find only his name. The mailman's bike sputtered outside in the heat, and the neighbor's kid dribbled a flat basketball across the driveway. The house had smells: onions frying, old sandalwood soap that suddenly felt like rooms in a museum where ropes told you not to touch. Adil had said he'd fix it. Shabnam had said I was stressed. The invitation said nothing about a +1. In the next minutes, you'll see how a woman who never raises her voice canceled a wedding without tipping over a single centerpiece. You'll see where the money went, how the contract was written, and why the floor under that glittering stage was never solid. If that sounds like revenge, know this: I don't throw tantrums. I file things. On the dais, the MC cleared his throat and tapped the mic. My phone buzzed once in my palm. Just once. Like a small animal waking. Out of habit. I slid it open to the locked folder I'd titled with a single letter V and saw the green checkmark I'd been waiting for. Paperwork leaves a smell when the printer is hot and the ink is new. Even on a screen, I imagined it. The bitter, clean scent of fresh clauses like cut citrus on a winter day. A runner hustled past with a bundle of place cards, all cream and gold. One slid loose and skated across the parquet to my sandal. I let it rest against the edge of my foot, its small weight oddly specific. Later, I thought, let it be a mark on the stage, a thread. I stayed near the back long enough to mark the geometry of the room. The elders congregated at the tables to the left of the stage, where the light was warmer and kind to the fine lines carved by decades of laughter and grief. The cousins had taken the front right, a sea of phones held aloft, their bodies tilted toward the dais like sunflowers. The hallway to the kitchen ran behind a partition, that lattice screen humming with the breath of the hidden aircon. The gift table was near the door, under a security camera the size of a marble. The venue manager, a woman named Nita, who could spot a wilting arrangement from 40 feet, stood at the perimeter, arms loose, eyes bright good. Managers move like dancers, present and invisible. And at the exact center of the stage, standing with a posture like a ruler, was the person who'd insisted I was a complication who needed to be kept out of sight. So it seems I'm not family. She'd said it herself in different words. When she banished me from the invitation list, she didn't whisper. She assumed it would drift and then settle. Our circles are very particular. She'd sighed over tea, as if her circles were weather systems I should respect. You'll understand. The crowd is old school. Sometimes it's better to manage perception. In my work, I manage perceptions that could bankrupt a company if you blinked. I handled vendor audits and partnership renewals for a logistics firm that could quantify loss in minutes and calories of fuel. I knew what a refusal looks like when it dresses up as etiquette. You label a person a problem. Then you architect the paperwork around them. The mic squealed and the MC winced. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could gather near the stage," he said. Eyes scanning for the mother of the groom, the mother-in-law to be. The woman who had organized her own coronation under an arch of imported orchids. The hall shifted, its weight chairs scrapped back. Bangles chimed like small bells. Velvet sandals whispered across the floor. I raised my head and breathed in the air that arrived with emotion. Even the carpets had a scent, a blend of mothball and powdered rose. I thought of the missing envelope from 3 days ago. The one Adil never found in the drawer where we keep our warranties and certificates. A space left on a shelf can be as loud as a slammed door. The waiter nearest the rear glanced at me, at my lanyard, and then at the stage where Nita nodded once, a signal. I gave him the smallest smile, the kind that says, "Carry on." The MC had been briefed on a script line. The phrase the planner told him to use once the bride and the new husband arrived to cut the cake. "It would be a nice line for photos," she'd said. 78 steps that brought us here. He was supposed to intone like a priest. 78 was the venue's legal capacity. The script line was a match. I'd seen the contract. I'd seen all of them. Weeks ago, when Shabnam banished me from paper and air, I kissed Adil's forehead and told him we would keep breathing. Then I asked him to forward me a single email, just the one from the venue with the deposit details. "For our records," I said. He forwarded it while we stood in the kitchen under the rattle of the cheap exhaust fan. I heard the ping on my phone and saw the subject line. Booking confirmation, Community Hall, Clifton. Ref CH 7719 and the attached PDF with the words, terms and conditions, breathing commas and colons. Nobody reads those like I do. I read them like a map. By the time the planning meeting started, I had the vendor list. Not because I scoured my husband's phone, but because my neighbor, Zoya, mentioned she'd seen a driver unload crates of glassware at the hall 2 Thursdays before the date. From a company called Illume, she'd said, picking a thread from the hem of her kurta. Their truck had the number printed big on the back. I wrote it down. I made a contact in my phone named V and saved 3 numbers under its venue, vendor and vault. I layered them with tags like a cautious baker layering phyllo, fragile but precise. When you strip away the music and the silk, a wedding is a cluster of contracts. Vendor obligations, payment schedules, rights to terminate for cause and for convenience, force majeure indemnity, liabilities capped to consideration paid, clauses that seem like ambient wallpaper until one day someone with a lanyard and calm eyes walks up to the wall and presses a spot where the paper sounds hollow. The bride arrived at the side entrance with her entourage like a slow tide, bangles and perfume and the thin hiss of chiffon. The sound popped in the room like a cork. The MC gestured with both palms up as if catching rain. The crowd parted. This city's favorite choreography, the river of attention diverted. The current turning, people stepping back to let the shine pass. For a heartbeat, the temperature dipped near the open door and the light sharpened to a blade like noon. Then the door shut and the air flattened again under the fan's patience. I waited for Adil to look at me. He didn't. He stood 2 people behind his mother, chin lifted. He had always had the kind of face that made strangers hand him a heavy box and a list of instructions. When we met, I'd been the one with a spreadsheet and a spare battery pack in my purse. He'd fallen in love with my competence like it was a fragrance and told me I made the world make sense. You can take chaos and file it, he'd marvel. He'd meant it as worship. Sometimes people worship you for the very thing they will be offended by later. If there are 2 kinds of power in rooms like this, loud and soft, I had learned to be the third kind. The kind that moves through paperwork and timestamps. the kind that does not announce itself until it has already executed. 3 days earlier, Shabnam had called just to confirm something. The line cracked with the cheapness of her phone plan or the weather. Aisha, she'd said, drawing my name in a tone like a pearl being rolled between fingers. Don't be offended, but the seating is so tight. I could hear the clink of a spoon in a cup. Old friends, so many traveling. You know how it is. I said, yes, I do know how it is. I know the difference between a constraint and a choice. After we hung up, sat at our small dining table with the morning light clean on the glass, and wrote 2 lines on a white page. 1. Review venue contract cancellation, substitution rights. To verify funds, path source, approval, account control. Light on paper reveals texture. The window was cool to the touch. A breeze threaded itself through the lattice outside and carried a trace of salt from the sea. My breath made a small cloud on the glass that disappeared in 3 seconds. I timed it. Time itself is data if you're willing to record it. When the deposit for the hall had been paid, it left our joint account. Not because Shabnam didn't have money, but because optics are softer when the son does things for the mother. We'll cover the hall, Adil had said, trying to be gallant, not asking me. Telling me before dinner that night like it was a weather report. He's good. He meant to be good. Mummy will pay for the food. We'll pay the hall. It's a family event, he'd said, and smiled as if the words were a rope we were supposed to hold together. I nodded and matched his smile with a knife hidden in a napkin. Let's use the operating account, I'd suggested lightly. The one we use for grocery and utilities, so we can track the ledger easily. He'd agreed, distracted, somewhere between affection and preoccupation. That account had my audit trail on it, like a watermark. The payment went out via online transfer. The bank's portal spit out a reference number that started with IBFTCH and ended with 4 digits that repeated a rhythm. I remembered even when I wasn't looking. The hall acknowledged the receipt in an email signed by Nita, the venue manager, with her title in a small font she likely hated. Their PDF included a clause that read like a shrug to most, but to my ear was music in a minor. Key. Booking may be canceled by the client for convenience, provided written notice by the client is served no later than 70 to 72 hours prior to the event's start. Upon such cancellation, deposits shall be refunded to the original client account, less a service charge of 10%, 10%. The original client account was ours. The client was Adil, our address at the top, our email as primary contact. In other words, the person with cancellation rights was not Shabnam. It wasn't the planner. It wasn't a cousin with a loud laugh and a love of organizing other people's days. The person with the power to cancel for convenience was me, okay? Because Adil had forwarded the contracts to me and because, in our home, I drafted the emails. I managed the accounts. My name was on the profile under initiated by. In a city where the sun spoils milk in 10 minutes, we do things quickly. People forget to ask who controls the door. I drafted an email. I set it to send at 9:01 a.m., 3 days before the event. Then I waited, because impatience is sloppy and sloppy leaves fingerprints. That morning, a pigeon landed on our balcony railing and cooed like a person confessing. The tea was too hot. The steam fogged my reading glasses for a heartbeat. I set them down on a folded kitchen towel whose cotton had started to thin like a worn prayer rug. The email went out when the minute clicked, carrying a PDF I'd edited to include Adil's signature, which he'd given me authorization to e-sign on our utility bills and, by quiet extension, on this. I invoked Clause 7, 2, termination for convenience by client, and included the mandatory language. We hereby cancel booking ref CH 7719. Effective 72 hours prior to event start. Kindly initiate refund to the originating client account ending -4421 per the wire ID enclosed. See attached PDF and screenshots. Screenshots are handwriting for the era we live in. I included one from our bank app showing the original transfer, the IBFT code, one from the email acknowledgement with Nita's signature, and one from the contract page itself, the clause underlined in blue. I also attached a scanned letter on our joint letterhead letter. Head can be a Word document if you are neat saying the same in print. Dated, with my name printed beneath as authorized correspondent per client. People confuse fonts with power. Fonts are just costume. Substance is time-stamped. At 9:07 a.m., my phone buzzed. Receipt of cancellation. Nita's office wrote an auto act first. At 9:39, a manual reply arrived. Dear Mr. Adil Khan, it read. We acknowledge your cancellation per Clause 7. 2. Refund will be issued to originating account per standard. Processing 2 to 4 business days. Please confirm bank details below. A block of characters waited, familiar for digits repeating the rhythm I could tap on the table with a spoon. I confirmed. Politeness is part of compliance. You can put someone in handcuffs with a please and thank you if you copy the right people. I copied the accounts payable specialist at the Hall APS. The one whose desk was a honeycomb of sticky notes in a basement office that always smelled faintly of ink and dust. When you include apps, you tell the building that the building is being watched. An hour later, my bank app showed a pending inbound reversal. The bank called to verify. Madame Khan, we have a refund inbound from Clifton Community Hall. Please confirm. I confirmed. The call center's cold air reached me through the phone. How do they make it sound like that? The crispness of a room with white light and no windows. The agent read the digits of my account, paused at the last 2 as if to check that the handover was clean, then said, verified. Funds will be placed on hold pending clearance. A hold is a small hand on your wrist, gentle, restraining, official. By afternoon, I had a reversal email from the hall, a recalculated invoice, and an attached notice of event withdrawal PDF, which is a genteel name for a lighthouse beam, unmistakable when you see it from the water. I forwarded it to myself and saved it in 3 places: V Venue, V Vault, and a hidden folder in my work cloud labeled with a word only my brain recognized. I printed 2 hard copies and slid one into a locked drawer in the study, where it sat beside a copy of our rent agreement and a passport photo. Adil hated because the light had found his left eye and made it look half closed. I didn't tell him. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because Shabnam had made the wedding a performance starring herself. And you don't ruin a performance with a whisper in the audience. You let the curtain go up. You let the actors take their marks. If this sounds unkind, let me return you to the days that followed her call. She didn't just ban me. She enlisted accomplices. She told the cousins it would be better if I skipped to avoid drama. She told the planner to reallocate my seat to the ladies of the club. She told me to send my blessings, as if good wishes could be wire transferred like refunds. When the first round of family WhatsApp photos started decor samples, menu tastings, I reacted with the appropriate emojis and said nothing else. The quiet I held between my teeth had a metallic taste like coins and blood. At work, that same week, a vendor attempted to reroute a payment with a forged letterhead. I caught the error by the curl of a serif and a missing comma after limited. That's the job. You notice the seam. You pull it gently. You don't shout that you found it. You call accounting and say, flag this, hold the release, escalate to legal. And then you record the call. And then you log the call. And then you draft the corrective action plan on a letter, which you sign, scan, and archive. I decided to treat the wedding as work. When a person tries to recategorize you into a type that makes their status neat, you have 2 choices: accept the label or reclassify the event. The refund arrived in full minus the 10%. That 10% was a fee to the gods of process, and I paid it with a smile. The hall offered a non-monetary goodwill credit for future bookings, which amused me so much I laughed alone in the kitchen while the kettle hissed and the window breathed salt. We weren't coming back, but it was nice to have a credit note folded like an extra napkin. That was the beginning. The rest was a web. Deposit refunds are nothing without the vendors. I mapped the event on a whiteboard: lighting, florals, catering, photography, sound, cake, security, valet. I wrote down the ones I could confirm and left blank lines where my knowledge failed. Then I started calling numbers. When a person hears a calm voice that offers them a path to compliance, they usually step on it. I'm calling to confirm receipt of the notice of event withdrawal from Clifton Community Hall. I told Illume, the lighting company. I said it slowly, so the capital letters were audible. Per Clause 3, 1 of your subcontract. You won't be on the hook for non-performance if the anchor client withdraws per contract. Can you send me your cancellation policy and any refund or rescheduling options? Please copy accounts at the hall so we can align ledgers. My tone was the white light at the bank. People behave in white light. Illume sent their policy within the hour and copied Nita, along with a PDF that had the words Service Release stamped across the top in a font that someone thought looked futuristic in. 2012, I added it to VVault. I called the florist. A man who said GG to everything and had a voice like a warm shawl. He sighed when I mentioned the hall's notice. Baji, we've already imported the orchids. I told him to send me the customs receipts. I told him to send me the wire confirmations for any deposits the hall had forwarded. He hesitated. It will help me escalate your case for reimbursements, I added. He sent them in 10 minutes with screenshots that included a wire ID that began W7793ORCH, which I clicked and logged in a spreadsheet where each ID had a small note column and a color code. Texture matters. The spreadsheet lived on my laptop, but also printed on warm paper that curled slightly at the edges in the apartment's humidity. I slid that paper under a ceramic paperweight, a faded blue with a chip like a child's tooth, and ran my fingers along the line where the ink bulged minutely from a long pause at a keystroke. Data can be observed with the body. The scent of the paper, the heat it held. The way the synthetic fiber of the printer sheet caught at the pad of my thumb, noticed all of it. Because all of it kept me steady. The kitchen filled with late afternoon light that had the color of weak tea, and the feeling of a hand on the back guiding you forward. The exhaust fan rattled. The neighbor's pressure cooker hissed and then sighed. When the delivery guy buzzed with a small package I hadn't ordered, opened it to find a roll of ribbon I recognized from the table's centerpieces. The label had a typo, Champagne. The sender address was the hall. A misshipment. Or a sign that someone in the chain didn't know which boxes were supposed to go where once the anchor client withdrew. I took a photo and added it to VVault. Open loop. Later, use it. Between calls, I kept the house clean, 'cause it's easier to commit acts of procedural justice from a counter that doesn't have crumbs. At night, Adil fell asleep on the couch with the news mumbling and the remote under his hand like a small animal. When he asked how my day had been, I said ordered and smoothed his hair away from his forehead with my palm. His phone chimed with wedding messages, and he pretended that the thread didn't make him stiffen. We didn't fight. We slept beside each other like we were listening to a shared radio station in the dark and refusing to remark on static. The morning before the event, the hall called. Not Nita. Accounts, madam? There's some confusion, the apps agent said, her voice all edges of paper. We've received conflicting information about the booking. The planner sent a schedule update. However, our system shows the booking as canceled per the client. We need written clarification from the client to proceed. Written clarification. A magic phrase. I said, you have it. It's what you received from us. If you have received any countermanding instructions, please forward them to me so we can address the source and close the loop. She hesitated exactly 3 seconds. I counted. Madam, can we request that you come in with ID? For verification. A request is a rope. I said, yes. I took the letter with the hall's header, the cancellation notice stamped received, and I walked into the community hall's office with my hair pinned up and my documents in a flat folder that smelled faintly of eucalyptus oil. The office was colder than the hall, fluorescent light flattening everything it touched. A calendar with a picture of a mountain hung crooked on the wall. A man at a back desk glanced up, put down a stapler, and then, as if the stapler had embarrassed him, reached for a stamp. Madame, the app's agent said, offering a chair. The plastic creaked under me. We need to verify that this cancellation was authorized. There has been. Pressure calls names. I slid my ID across the desk. I slid the joint account statement showing the original transfer. I slid the contract. I did not slide my temper. Per Clause 2. 1. The client has the right, I said softly. Per your acknowledgement, you have already reversed. Per my bank logs, the reversal is pending. If you have received requests from any party other than the client to reinstate, they must be directed to legal for compliance review. If we need to serve a notice to any such party, I have a pen. The man with the stamp had been staring at the corner of my folder as if waiting for authorization to exist. He stamped the cancellation notice again, a useless second blessing. Ink bled slightly on the cheap paper. The app's agent nodded with that specific grateful exhaustion. You learn when you've spent your day standing between a file and a phone call. We will comply, she said. Outside, heat leaped off the sidewalk like a thing startled, and the smell of frying oil from the vendor 2 doors down stuck to my skin. The city was a machine that kept running whether or not you felt ready. I breathed it, then went home and wrote letters. To the florist, a letter certifying that any payments forwarded by the hall on behalf of the client must be reversed per cancellation. To the lighting company, a notice acknowledging non-performance without penalty. To the security company, a rescission of request for guards. To the valet service, a revocation of consent to operate under the client's name. These were not acts of malice. These were cleanings. I sent copies to myself certified, so envelopes arrived the next day with red stamps like small thunders. I kept one unopened as a totem, the weight of it a reminder of what a sealed document can do to a room. By the morning of the event, the credit notifications had slowed to a trickle. The vendor group chat, someone added my number without asking. Assuming I was the cousin with Excel was a theater of drama. The bride still wants the stage, someone wrote. We were told to set up and sort payment later, wrote another. I sent one message only to the group and to Nita. Attached, re-notice of event withdrawal please, see attached. Our ledger at the bank reflects the cancellation. Any performance may proceed if another party assumes the contract and its liabilities. Otherwise, per compliance, please stand down. There is always someone who tries to change the subject to emotion. You're ruining a family's day, a cousin wrote. A woman who had once borrowed my tailoring chalk and never returned it. I didn't respond. It wasn't me. The day had been altered 3 days prior by an email written in black and white and executed with stamps and wires. What they were about to feel was the sound of that earlier act arriving on the shore, which is how I came to stand in the hall with a lanyard at my throat while the MC tapped the mic. You might wonder why the lights were on, the centerpieces blooming, the band playing. How does a hall set up a canceled event? Simple. Another party had stepped into the hole. Shabnam had called in favors. She'd told the planner that there was a misunderstanding, and the planner had believed the most powerful voice in the room. She had offered a personal guarantee to vendors that money would be sorted. She'd whispered to a donor friend that if he could just front the security, she would repay him from her club funds. And the hall, kind, tired, compliant, had allowed the stage to rise because sometimes the machine runs on autopilot when the hands that should stop it are busy on the phone. But the ledger would not allow them far. Money is a gate with a stubborn code. And I held the audit trail like a key. Nita moved toward the mic, a little rush of thoughtful energy, and murmured to the MC. He nodded. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a slightly late start due to a small technicality." The word small was a napkin laid over a wound. The fans hummed. A murmur moved through the room, the kind of sound that makes your shoulder blades touch. Shabnam lifted her chin. She was beautiful. I do not lie. The sari silk caught the light and the pink in it warmed her skin. She had a new ring, wide and full of a stone like a drop of late sunset. She caught my eye for the first time that evening and held it. The look said, "Not here, not now." The look said, "You will embarrass and therefore you will be a problem." Problems are not family. So it seems I'm not family. I thought, but I didn't say it, not yet. I let the phrase curl up beside my tongue like a coin saved for a toll booth. The first ally moved Nita. She stepped onto the stage and took the mic. Her voice the exact tone you use when you're about to explain a fire drill without causing panic. As the venue manager, I want to ensure all protocols are complied with, she said, and the word complied slid into the room like a bead on a wire. We have a notice on file regarding this booking. People blinked. She lifted a hand to the projector in the corner. The screen sprang to life with the hall's logo, 2 arches, nesting, and a document header. Per our policy, she continued, some clarifications are now required. I could feel the temperature shift in the room. That breathless moment in June when the monsoon finally announces itself hours before the first storm actually breaks. The smell of muggy cardboard from the boxes stacked behind the partition. The faint metallic scent from the audio cable heating where it looped around the speaker stand. The powdery sweetness of someone's towel call if it sharpened. The second ally was my neighbor Zoya, who slipped into the hall with a tote bag that said receipts, in English, like an inside joke. She had sworn she would mind her own business. She didn't, and I loved her for it. She took a spot near the gift table and stood like a pillar you don't notice until the building sways. The third was the APS agent, whom Nita had texted with a single sentence, "Come to the hall with file CH7719, and who did, with her plastic ID still around her neck. Let the antagonists speak first. It's a principle and a pleasure." "Excuse me," the planner said. "Too loud?" "What notice?" The client wished to proceed. Shabnam's friends, women with hair that never lost volume, murmured. Someone's bracelet clinked in annoyance. The MC looked as if he wished he were back at a corporate seminar, where the worst conflict is a missing USB drive. The client did not wish to proceed. I said, finally letting my voice exist. It took a second for the people nearest me to shift their weight and look toward the back. I stepped forward to where the light from the projection hazed across the room and made dust visible. I could smell my own perfume, a clean citrus that suddenly felt like armor. The client canceled per clause 7.2. The hall acknowledged. Funds were reversed. Any further performance requires a substituted client assuming the liabilities or a reinstatement by the original client. Neither has been executed. Who is this? Someone said, soft, a knife in silk. I'm the person who received the refund, I said. On behalf of my household, I didn't say I'm the woman you wrote out of the seating chart. Shabnam smiled, a controlled unfurling of lip gloss and old training. We had a misunderstanding, she told the room. The venue knows. It's all sorted. Please, let's not spoil the mood. She turned to Nita as if we were in a kitchen and she had caught a maid scratching a pan. We spoke. My son gave an overzealous instruction not to be acted upon. The family is proceeding with the function. Nita looked at me, then at the app's agent, then back at Shabnam. Madame, she said with that careful respect for a woman who might call you at midnight to yell about a napkin color. We cannot proceed without compliance. The booking was canceled by the client. To rebook, we would need the client's written instruction and a cleared deposit. We do not have either. Shabnam's ring clicked against the mic stand. What is this nonsense? She said. Her voice had a crack. It sounded like a plate being stacked too hard on another plate. A deal, she called. Turning, tell them. A deal swallowed. He looked at me like a man near the rail of a boat in a fog, trying to hear which way the horn is sounding. Ma, he said. I signed authorization. He didn't say my name. He didn't say it because names have sides, and he was afraid of being pulled to one. Shabnam laughed in disbelief. It was the laugh you give a clerk who asks you to fill out a form you consider beneath you. He's mistaken, she told the room. We are proceeding. I'll be brief, I said. I walked to the edge of the dais, each step a small witness. The projector's light warmed my cheek. I could hear the fan blades sliding air above like a train far away. 3 days ago, we canceled per clause. The hall acknowledged. The refund was initiated to our joint account, I said, lifting my phone, which showed a screenshot with the last 4 digits of the account, the bank's watermark, the processing timestamp. The vendors who received deposits through the hall's payment channel have been instructed to reverse or redeploy under a new client if a new client exists who assumes full liability. If any vendor continues without that, they are in breach. I won't involve the police, I added, because this is civil, not criminal. But I will file notices and I will freeze any attempt to debit our account for services we did not authorize. Tonight can proceed if someone else steps into the contract and pays. Here. Now with verifiable funds. That's your choice, not mine. Silence. Even the forks had stopped punctuating time. Shabnam's mouth tightened. You're petty, she said. It wasn't the worst thing I've been called. The worst thing was nothing. The worst thing was invisibility. You couldn't bear to be gracious. You sabotage? She turned to her friends, seeking their eyes. She does work with contracts, she said, loading the word with an implication that paper was a poor replacement for class. She thinks forms matter. Forms matter. Forms are the only reason your car is legally registered and the only reason. Your money sits quietly where you put it until you tell it to move. Forms are the bones under the party dress. But I didn't say any of that. I looked at a deal. I told you I wouldn't shout, I said. I'm using process and receipts. The apps agent stepped up like a clerk at a civil ceremony. She held a file in both hands. We have documentation, she said. We can project it, if that helps the group understand. The word group was a small mercy. We weren't a family at that moment. We were a group. Project, I said. The document appeared. The hall's notice of event withdrawal filled the screen, stamped, signed, with my email as the correspondence point. Then the original contract with the clause circled. Then a redacted screenshot of the bank reversal. The bank's name was masked. The last 4 digits visible, the wire ID clear as an index finger pointing. The florist's wire confirmation. The lighting company's service release. Each landed on the room like a stamp. The band at the back whispered among themselves. The chef peered out through the kitchen door, towel slung over his shoulder like a white flag. Someone whispered, "This is too much." Someone else said, "She played them." I never play. I document. Shabnam tried one more angle. "Fine," she said, breath-catching. "Fine. I will pay. I will transfer right now." She held up her phone like an amulet. Nita moved toward her gently. "Madam, we require cleared funds," she said. "Not promises. Not screenshots of pending, cleared. Alternatively, a certified bank draft. Our policy states," and she gestured to the projection as if to include the policy in the room's shared air, "that rebooking requires non-refundable payment. We are past business hours for banks. We can hold the hall for 1 hour." Someone in the back made a sound like a chair skidding, and the sound cracked the hush. Shabnam's donor friend, a man with a voice like motor oil, stepped forward. "I'll vouch," he said, swaggering as if the act of vouching were currency. The app's agent doesn't live in swagger. She lives in clearance. "Sir," she said, "vouching is not a payment instrument." "You're ungrateful," Shabnam told me. Quiet now, intimate enough to be almost kind. Heat ran along my neck under the shawl like a wire. "We took you in," she said. "We gave you a name." The fan spun. The day's light buzzed, a faint mosquito whine. "You taught me something," I said. "That paper is love when love is unreliable. Paper protects." I looked at Adil again. He stood as if he'd been told to balance a glass on his head. "We can go home," I told him. "Or we can stay while they decide how to treat a contract." He bowed his head. It wasn't submission. It was inventory. He has always been able to take an inventory quickly and to distinguish what is sentimental from what is structural. He led me to a chair near the back and we sat, and around us the room retracted like a held breath. No music, whispers in clumps. The clink of an ice bucket somewhere like the smallest bell in a temple. In the end, the hall made its call. Nita took the mic in both hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we will be closing the hall for this booking. We will accommodate any rebooking when compliance is achieved. Food prepared will be packaged for donation to the community kitchen nearby, per our policy for canceled events to reduce waste. We thank you for your understanding. It was not their fault nor mine." The decision belonged to a clause in a contract signed when the air was cooler and everyone thought love could outrun procedure. People stood gathering handbags and hurt. The smell of Mogra tilted toward, bruised. The bride's face-poor woman wavered between fury and indignity. She pulled from somewhere behind her sternum like a clean handkerchief. Shabnam left without looking at me, her perfume lingering in the doorway like the memory of a better day. She brushed past Soya, whose tote bag bumped her hip gently like a pet. The donor friend huffed himself toward the exit. The planner sat heavily on a chair and put her face in her hands, and then straightened, like a professional who still had clients to call and fees to salvage. The band packed quietly, their shoes squeaking against parquet, their speaker cables coiling like sleeping snakes. We stayed until the hall had dimmed most of the lights. The room looked like a set after a play. Shapes without actors, props removed, meaning archived. The air cooled enough to put a lightness in my joints. I walked up to the dais and picked up the crystal vase, heavy as a promise I didn't make, and handed it to a staff member. "Take it to storage with the rest," I said. He nodded, grateful to be told something without emotion attached. When we stepped into the hallway, the smell of bleach rose from a mop bucket. The air outside had shifted. A wind off the sea tugged at the edges of my sleeves. The city felt like a ledger that had closed for the day with the numbers lined up, a hum underneath like satisfaction. In the parking lot, the security guard stood with his hands behind his back, chest out. "Madam," he said, "sorry for—" And he trailed off, gesturing at the whole theater. I nodded. "Thank you for keeping order." At home that night, we didn't talk. We moved through rooms like two librarians putting books back after a frantic search. The kettle clicked. The spoon chimed against the cup like a small gong. The smell of tea leaves rising in boiled water is its own calendar. It tells you what year it is. I opened the locked drawer and put the sealed certified letter envelope on top of the stack. I ran my finger along its edge. Paper is a boundary that does not slam or cry. It exists. It witnesses. The days after were a ripple. The hall formalized its waste minimization program in a notice posted on their socials, citing the policy and photos of neatly packaged food delivered to the community kitchen. The charity posted a thank you and tagged the hall and anonymous donors. Shabnam's circle of friends performed concern in a group chat, then began to ask sub-questions in private. What exactly happened? Did she have a right? Should we change our processes? One of them, who sits on a charity board, called me. "Strictly between us," she said, in a sweetness that had been aged like vinegar. "How did you?" I told her nothing that wasn't in the public documents. A day later, the charity board updated its bylaws to require 2 signatures on any event contract to prevent unilateral commitments without board knowledge. Systems adjust when they are embarrassed. Our bank called to confirm that the reversal was clear. I asked for a letter certifying the reversal and the hold, and kept it in V-Vault. The florist called to ask if I'd accept a credit for a family event later. I told him to donate the orchids to a hospital ward. He sent me a photo of the flowers in a waiting room, where a young father sat with his head in his hands and a little girl in yellow sandals played with a string. The photo smelled like antiseptic through the screen, which is a trick of the mind but also an honest reading of the pixels. I cried, not because I had one, but because something tender had occurred without permission from the woman who had tried to write me out of her own wedding. I wrote a letter to Shabnam. It was 4 sentences. The first said that I would prefer no contact for a while. The second said that any attempted debit for hall charges would be disputed and reversed. The third said that if she wished to speak, she could put it in writing and send it by email. I would reply in writing. The fourth said that when she was ready to do family in a way that recognizes that paper protects us from pain, she could knock on the door and we would talk in the living room, where the cheap rug our cousin brought from Multan makes our feet itch. I printed it. I signed it. I scanned it. Sent it. I didn't wait for an answer. Answers are not necessary for boundaries to function. Adil went to his mother's apartment 2 days later and came back with a box. It held a mix of things, our wedding photos she had taken down dust, he said, offering me the box without meeting my eyes. A pressure cooker she said she had no use for in a new life without a big kitchen. A bookmark from a library that had closed during the pandemic. He set the box on the dining table and stared like it was a small fire we needed to watch burn out. She said you embarrassed her, he murmured. She said you acted like a clerk. I poured tea and put his cup in front of him, the saucer clinking with the small neatness that fills in for words. I acted like a person who has been told she is not family, I said. And who knows how to act when words try to exile her. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I reached into the box and pulled out a photo of our wedding where Shabnam was young enough to look like a blessing. I set it on the shelf in the living room beside a small brass bowl we use for keys. I smoothed the edge where the paper had a small fray, then stepped back. I have the capacity to keep records and to keep beauty in the same room. This is not a contradiction. It is a skill. For weeks, the ripples continued. The hall's manager sent me a thank you for helping us enforce policy with dignity. The planner revised her contracts to insist on cleared funds 48 hours prior and unwritten client confirmation for any reinstatement requests. My neighbor, Zoya, baked me a cake with frosting so glossy you could see your face in it. We ate it with forks under the window while the sea chased itself outside. The cousin who'd called me petty sent a text at midnight, I'm sorry, and I, who have learned to classify apologies the way one classifies gemstones, put it in the box marked polite and probably sincere. Shabnam went quiet. Then she went loud in a circle I wasn't in. Then she went quiet again. Eventually, she wrote. The letter was on thick paper and smelled faintly of her perfume. A scent like white flowers and iron. She wrote that she hadn't realized the contract made us the client. She hadn't meant to exclude me. That the invitation mistake had been the planner's. I printed her letter and attached a note to it, received. Then I put it in the drawer. A month later, on a Sunday morning, when the light was sweet on the table and the tea shared its small steam with the air, Adil and I took a walk down the street to the sea where men sell kites in colors that make your chest hurt. He took my hand with that carefulness he uses when he knows he has been imperfect and wants to perform. Not the theater of remorse, but the work. We need a new ritual, he said, and I agreed. Every Friday night we will go to the water and list what we protected that week, I suggested. And then we'll list what we let go. We chose a pen from the mug near the door, a cheap ballpoint with a grip like a narrow blessing, and wrote the first list on the back of a receipt we didn't need to keep. We said it out loud. Protected our account, our boundary, a stranger's meal. Let go. A seating chart, a fantasy of being pulled in by people who don't know how. It felt like breath. Sometimes I passed the community hall on my way to the market. Their new signboard lists policies clearly laminated against the weather. It makes me happy the way a stack of new notebooks does in June. I like seeing the words cleared funds and written authorization in Ariel. Bullet points that would bore anyone else. I imagine the parties those policies will protect. A father will wave a phone and say, I'll pay later. And the clerk will say, Sir, we need clearing. And someone in a soft shawl will exhale in relief because they cannot afford to be trampled by a swagger. Somewhere, a woman with a lanyard will stand in the back of a hall and know that if she needs to, she can file. This is not an abandonment of grace. It is grace with a backbone. Our living room has new light now because we moved the couch. Small changes rewrite the room's grammar. The rug still itches. We laugh about it. The crystal vase from that night never came home to us. It sits in a storage room somewhere, and I hope it's safe. The sealed, certified envelope still rests in the drawer. A sleeping animal we keep fed with the belief that we might need it one day. I hope we won't. But hope is not a plan. Plans are filed, stamped, countersigned. Last week, while Adil cut mangoes in the kitchen, juice sweet and golden on the board, a message pinged. Zoya and I had registered for a small vendor compliance workshop at the community center, yes, the one near the hall. We'd promised to share what we know about contracts with shopkeepers who lose deposits because they think a phone call is a contract. Keep it simple, Zoya had said. Make it kind. But teach them to ask for a copy. We printed handouts. We phoned the city clerk to confirm the room booking twice. We showed up with laminated name tags. The room smelled like dust and hope. An old woman in a purple shawl kept her receipts in a biscuit tin and let me hold them. The paper was soft and thin like 100 prayers handled by careful hands. We taught what we could. It wasn't a revolution, but it was civil. When we came home, the light at the threshold was the most ordinary beauty I know. And I stood in it until the sun broke and started to sink. City light at that hour is its own theology. Mango-colored, slow, forgiving, revealing dust and saving grace in the same embrace. I was not thinking about her or the hall or the night the band played the same love song twice. I was thinking about how water tastes different when you drink it after speaking for 2 hours to people who listened. Then my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't have saved. I'm standing at the hall. It read, "Your policies saved us tonight." They wanted vouching. We asked for clearing. Thank you. No name. No adornment. I sat on the steps and let the hot concrete press the heat into my calves like a grounded truth. Adil brought me a glass of water. The glass sweated. A drop ran down my wrist and made a crescent on my skin, a small signature that belonged to no one and everyone. We wrote the night's list. Protected, a seamstress's deposit, a clerk's job, a room's sanity. Let go. The need to be seen by those who confuse glitter with respect. I slept without dreams. Or if I dreamed, it was of paper that didn't burn, not even in rain. Weeks later, after time had placed a thin veil on the anger and ironed the fabric of our days, I saw Shaboon at the fruit market. The air was a stew of cumin and ripeness, the stall lights yellow, the ground wet from the vendor's hose. She stood with her back a little curved, counting notes into the greengrocer's hand. For a second, I saw not the woman who rolled my name in her mouth like a pearl to be discarded, but a woman doing math in a crowded place, smoothing a crumple from a bill that wasn't in her favor and pretending she didn't care. I almost touched her arm. Then I remembered my letter. Paper saved us both the performance of a conversation we weren't ready to give honest mouths to. I bought figs. I went home. I washed them, the water cold, the skin delicate as eyelids. That evening, Adil and I walked to the sea and stood beside a boy who flew a kite like an apology he had turned into a bird. The kite's tail sang a plastic song. The wind smelled of rust from an old ship. Lights bloomed on the horizon like cities invented that minute. He squeezed my hand once, not as thanks or penance, but as punctuation at the end of a sentence we had both read closely. He said, in the tone of someone who plans to be better, "Next time, my signature goes where it needs to." And then softly, like a humor discovered, so it seems I'm not family. He said it about himself, and in that echo, I understood that being family is a verb, not a place card. Family signs where it must. Family complies with policies that prevent harm. Family shows up at the hall with the right documents. When the first monsoon rain finally fell that year, it turned the road into a strip of erased pencil. The city smelled clean for 20 minutes. We filled a steel bowl with the rain and set it on the balcony for birds. In the morning, sparrows splashed in the water and shook their feathers with the pleasure of small creatures allowed joy. I watched with a mug in my hands and a calm I had earned through a series of verbs, reversed. Rescinded, revoked, filed, served, executed, recorded. Transferred, frozen, audited, certified, witnessed, countersigned, escalated, cited, complied. The birds didn't care. They were busy with the living. That, too, is a form of justice. If you read this to the end, share it with someone who thinks paperwork is the enemy. Tell them that calm can be learned and wielded without cruelty. And if you want another dignified justice story, just ask and I'll write you one.